Thank you, Isabella. Can you hear me? Yes. This is working. Okay. My Portuguese is non-existent, I'm sorry, so I'm speaking in English today. And it's a great pleasure to be here. I'd also like to introduce my colleague Richard Flood, who is sitting right here, who is a curator and a director of special projects at the new museum. And I'll talk a little bit more about a special project that we have going on in Sao Paulo later on. I don't know if you all are familiar with the new museum, but the museum was founded in 1977, so it's not so new, really. But being new all the time is part of our mission. So the person who created the new museum, Marcia Tucker, was a curator at the Whitney. When I started at the Whitney, she was a curator there, and I was an intern. And she left this big institution to form a museum that would be devoted to contemporary art. In 1977, there were very few museums interested in contemporary art. Today, it's just the opposite. Even the historical museums are interested in contemporary art. So a lot has changed, and she really helped make that happen. And she started this museum with no money and no collection of her own, just an idea. And it was a one-room operation that then grew into a small gallery, and then it grew some more, and until it is where it is today, which is on the Bowery. Maybe some of you have been there. We now have a proper building, and we opened that 5 years ago. So I'm going to speak a little bit about that process. I came as the second director in 1999, and the museum was on Broadway. It was a storefront, actually not dissimilar to this. It was the first floor of a bigger building. And whenever I would say I work at the new museum, people would say, which new museum? What new museum are you talking about? So we had a big problem. The art world knew the new museum, but outside of the art community, it was not well known. And I said to the board, we have to build a building that will broadcast our mission, that will really be visible, that will make us known for what we do. And it took a little while to convince them that we should do this, but it took actually 7 years to complete the new building. Okay, I'll show some pictures now. I just want to make a few remarks, because when we were thinking about building a new building, of course, the Guggenheim Bilbao had already been open for a few years and was a huge success. And I think there was a very big debate that's always gone on about architecture versus art. Can great architecture really be hospitable for art, or is it always fighting with the art? Is it better to take an old factory space or an old building and convert it for art? This is just goes on and on and on. But in the 90s and this decade of this century, so many new, wonderful buildings have been built, and museums have proven to be great clients for new architecture, for great architecture. And so just a few examples. This is Herzog and de Meuron's De Young Museum in San Francisco. This is Sana's Museum of the 21st Century in Kanazawa, Japan. This is Tadeo Ando's Pulitzer Museum in St. Louis, and Diller and Scofidio's Institute of Contemporary Art in Boston. And this is our building, also by Sana, which is really beautiful, and we feel very lucky to have gotten such a good building. But why is it that museums are great clients? Because one, they know how to work with artists. That's what they do. So we regard architecture as an art like any other, and we're there to support the artist, and we're there to support the architect. We have a very specific program, so that's clear. But also, museums are not guided by developers' interests. They're not trying to get the most square footage out of the money that they're investing. So we had a lot of freedom in that. The architect can then create something that's much less bound by codes of zoning, because in New York especially, and probably here too, everyone's going to try to build to the maximum square footage to get the most out of their investment. But a museum doesn't think like that. So I think that's one idea. This is our mission, which is pretty unique among museums. It's new art and new ideas. We always have to push ourselves to get out of our comfort zone. That's just just in our DNA. It's what we do. We can't stay static. We can't be too institutional. And when we built this building, we had a big dilemma, because suddenly we're a big edifice now. We're a big white box space. And what are we going to do about that? This is the antithesis of what we stand for. So that's something that we talk about all the time. How can we get beyond the structure and keep reinventing and keep it fluid? So that's part of who we are. We show artists, often give them their first shows in a museum. So we've shown many artists first, and including several from Brazil. Most recently, Rivani Neuenschwander had her first American museum exhibition at the New Museum. But many, many others too. And these artists are so loyal to the museum because it's a benchmark occasion for them. It's a great occasion for them to have their first exhibition in a museum. And so they are really such an important part of our community. And in fact, I know that you're interested in hearing about how the museum is supported, and I have to say that artists are probably our most generous supporters, which is, I don't think I've ever said that publicly before, but it's really shocking, but it's really true. And without even realizing it, the generosity that they've extended to the museum over time is extraordinary. So that you all recognize, maybe, Silda Morales, from an exhibition that was at the museum when I first arrived in '99, at which point in New York, he was not known at all. Here, of course, he was already a very big figure, but in New York, people had not heard of him. And most of his big installations were unsold. They still belong to him. And Bernardo Paz came to the New Museum. He saw the exhibition. He bought several of the installations out of our show. And that's when I first met him in 1999. Now you can go to Inyochim and see it. Paul McCarthy is another. William Kentridge. This is just a few examples. Our focus is contemporary art, and we have a global mission. So we look at art from all over the world. And this is just a sampling of some of the countries that have been represented in our program. It's actually much bigger than this now. So this is where we're located, at the intersection of so many great neighborhoods in New York City. We are on the Bowery. It's between Little Italy, the Lower East Side, Chinatown. Soho is very close by. And I just want to speak a little bit about how we started on this project. So I came in '99. In 2001, we had 9/11. And we decided that we were going to stay downtown, but we would build this building anyway. We would be the first to start rebuilding this part of the city that was so devastated. We were really affected by it. We were closed for weeks, really. South of Houston Street was just shut off where we were located. We were in Soho at the time. So we started looking for spaces around the city, and we were focusing on downtown. And we found this parking lot on the Bowery, which is sitting just at the end of Prince Street. It's very unusual in New York to have a long view to a site. It's almost unheard of, that you look down a long street and there's it dead ends, and you have this space. You have our building now. So the Bowery, this is a picture of the Bowery in the 19th century. Well, I think 1890, maybe 1900, let's say, when it was the site of an elevated train. One of the first trains in New York ran along the Bowery, the 3rd Avenue L. And it was very noisy, and it was very dirty, and the street kind of went downhill. I don't know if you know the Bowery. It's infamous. It's like Broadway. It's a famous street, but it's famous because it's known as Skid Row. It's known as a place of drunks, of prostitutes, of homeless people, and it's been very rough neighborhood for 150 years. When they took the elevated train down in the 50s, who do you think was the first group to move in? Artists, of course. Because look how wide the street is for New York. It has 6 lanes. So there's so much light there. It was a wonderful place for artists. And in fact, from abstract expressionists like Franz Klein, who lived there, Mark Rothko, to William Burroughs and some of the beat poets, to the pop artists, Roy Lichtenstein was there, Robert Indiana, Rosenquist, to then Eva Hess, Robert Ryman. There were generations of artists who populated this street, and they said it was a sign of success if you had a Bowery loft because there was so much light. So anyway, that shows the sad side of the street. So artists were living alongside of these down and out people. And that's what it is today. So the street is still going, it's going through tremendous transition now because of what the new museum started. And so we're very aware of our position in this, both for the good and bad. There's a lot of gentrification, which means, rents are going up, artists are forced out. It's changing. At the same time, there are a lot of entrepreneurs moving in and small businesses moving in, and a lot of very interesting things happening. There are 60 galleries around the museum now. 60. So it's a very, very active and vibrant gallery area for young artists. So we have a combination of things. That shows it in Manhattan. So just to talk a little bit about the process of building the building, because I know there are some architects here and others might be interested. In concert with our mission, in line with our mission of new art, new ideas, we very much wanted to hire a firm who had not built in New York and give them their first chance. Just like we give artists their first shows, we wanted to give an architect their first chance to build in New York City, which is an exciting idea. And so we did a competition. We did a request for proposals. We looked at about 50 firms, and we selected 5. We looked all around the world, and we found so many great young architects who had done museums in their own countries, had worked with artists, and were really great candidates. So it was hard because there were just so many talented firms. But we ended up selecting Sana because they did such a brilliant proposal. They took our needs for gallery spaces, and here they're shown as a series of boxes, and then they stacked them on top of each other. On the left side, you see what most people would build if you were building a commercial office building in New York. That's what you would build, because that is maximizing the square footage. And instead, they built what you see on the right. That's what they're designing, which is every floor is shifting off of a central core. Well, we'd never seen a building like this. I don't think there is one that existed at that time that's quite like this. And every time the floor shifts, there's light that can come in So this was the slide that won the competition for them. When they showed us this slide, we said, okay, so here's the typical building with a straight facade, and then that's open. So closed, open. And just that very simple gesture of opening the drawers or opening the building and separating the floors like that just created a whole new kind of architecture. We loved it. Of course, the building evolved. This is very early proposal here. And you see the shape of the building eventually became something quite different. But this was the general idea. And this just shows light that's coming in. And this is how the scheme evolved. So it's not as blocky as it was initially. It's longer, taller. They discovered certain things, like we had to have water towers on the roof, things they didn't know when they started out. And there are no columns. All the floors are cantilevered off of the elevator core, the central core. There are no columns in the space. And for that, they had to do very detailed steel structure and worked with two top engineers to design this. I think it's such a beautiful form in itself, the steel structure. Anyway, that's what it looks like. And then the final change that they made was the skin, the surface of the building itself, which is a metal mesh. And it's an industrial material that had not been used in buildings like this, but now we're seeing it. Now it is being used in buildings everywhere. We're seeing it everywhere. But the wonderful thing about it is that it gives the building this unified quality, but it changes with every time of the day, every season. It's a constantly shifting, changing entity. So we love this about the design, that the floors are shifting, the form is shifting, and the feeling of the building itself is always changing, which is very much like the nature of contemporary art. And that's a view of it at night. This is that long view down Prince Street to see the building frontally. And this gives a sense of the way that it changes in different light. So when we started with that, looking for a site, we did a informal conversation with our board. We interviewed every board member to see how much they would be willing to give to support this project. And what we discovered was that we should do a project for $2 million. So forget about that building. We barely could buy the land, but that's what they said. $2 million is all you can raise. So okay, maybe you can think about a $10 million project and find ways to raise the rest of the money. But then after the architecture process, more people got interested and involved. It really was such a beautiful design that it attracted a lot of support and really helped us to raise the money for it. I mean, it's a great project. So we started with the idea of $10 million, and we ended up raising $75 million, which still, in the scheme of things, this is a 60,000 square foot building. It's big, and it cost $50 million to construct. For me, it was, money. I'd never raised anything like this before, so it was a completely new experience, as it was for our board. Our board was not used to this either. But in terms of price per square foot, it was still really reasonable. And that was part of what we wanted to do, too, to show that you can make great architecture in an expensive city, and it doesn't have to be a fortune. It doesn't have to, $50 million is a lot, but it doesn't have to be, $2,000, $3,000 a square foot, which many projects are. So I just show you some pictures of the inside of the building. This is the lobby, and the idea, again, in line with being open. And we feel as an institution we're very open to new ideas and fearless to take on controversial topics, and always alive. Art is always living and changing. It should not be static or dead. So in line with that, the architect decided to just extend the street into the lobby of the building. So it's very much an extension of the sidewalk. We have this glass all the way from floor to ceiling. And there's a feeling of openness. We want to be welcoming. We don't want to have an edifice that's like a castle or, or a church. So it's a different feeling from most museums. And this is once you're inside, there's more glass. There's art immediately when you come inside, and you can see it from the street. We wanted that experience of art to be your first experience of the museum. We have a theater downstairs that's about the size of this room, actually, where we do many, many things. We do about 300 different performances a year of dance and music, lectures, films. And these are some of the gallery spaces. As I mentioned, every floor has skylights. They're in different positions on each floor. This was our opening exhibition on Monumental. This is a connecting stair between floors where the public can circulate. And then there is a top floor space that looks out over the city, which is quite wonderful and has terraces that we use for events. Another view of some of the galleries. We have many education programs for teenagers and for children who just love to be in the museum. And there again, every Saturday we invite families from the neighborhood to come in to the museum for free. They can come in with their families and participate in a range of projects around the exhibitions. It's very, very popular. And the kinds of activities, let's see. I don't want to lose that. Okay, so I mentioned that. Let's talk a little bit about funding, because I know you wanted to hear about that. When we started the building, as I mentioned, the board thought they could themselves contribute $2 million. We decided if we were going to take on this project that we would insist that 100% of the board participated. In other words, everybody on the board had to give something. It couldn't just be a few people contributing, but everyone had to give whatever they could, the most that they could. And that was very important. We thought we could not go out and ask other people to support our museum until our own board, the primary stakeholders, had all given. So that was the first step. And it took, some of them said, oh, I'm going to have to leave the board, I can't do it. In the end, they all stayed and they all did do it. So it was a learning process. It took some time, but it was good. And we had a board of about 20 people when I started. We now have 40 trustees. So we did grow the board during this time. We added new trustees. And for a new trustee to come on, we asked a much higher contribution. So through those new board members, we asked $500,000 from each, but we allowed them to pay over 5 years. So they could pay $100,000 a year over 5 years. So we raised quite a lot that way. And then we had many opportunities for them, naming opportunities. They could name a gallery, they could name a program, they could name a position, they could name my position or Richard's position. The elevator, the bathrooms. A lot of people, in fact, the bathrooms were the first named by our board because that's the kind of board members we have. They're fun. They thought that was fun. They said that's where most people spend their time, so We want to be there. I know, it's crazy. But we have really beautiful bathrooms, too, I have to say. So it's fine. So, you know, a lot of people are critical of that. Oh, they're selling everything. You know, they're putting names on everything. It's not so bad, and it's discreet. And it's fine. You know, hospitals do it now, libraries do it, everyone does it. Theaters sell seats, they have names on the backs of seats, which we did too, like these. But it's fine, and people like that idea that their name will forever be associated with this museum, and their children can come and see it. It's quite nice. Some museums have even sold bricks in the floor, like put your name on a brick. I think it's fine. And then, of course, if you contributed to the project, you could come to the special opening events, and at a certain level, you would be a member for life. You would have a lifetime membership, which people like. So that way, we raised quite a bit. We raised $75 million. It was shocking to us. It just kept going, and it developed so much momentum. And once we got advice from one of our trustees who said, do not start erecting steel, do not start building until you have all of the money for construction. Because there have been some stories of museums who start and they don't have the money and they can't finish. So we were very careful not to do that. We had to wait until we had the $50 million to start. So we raised money through individuals, we raised money from foundations, and the city also contributed. When we first went to speak to the city of New York, they said, oh no, we're not going to give anything to you because we have other plans for our funding. We want to restore all the waterfronts of New York. We want to build a big stadium for football, whatever. They said, no, we're really not doing cultural capital projects. But we kept at it. We actually hired a lobbyist who lobbies the politicians, and that was very effective. And in the end, I think they gave us about $7 million. So 10% of the project came from the city at the end of the day. But it started with no. It started with nope, not going to happen. So you just persist. You don't give up. And that's 90% of it. So when we started, our operation was $3 million a year. That's what it cost to run the new museum when we were on Broadway. And now it's $12 million a year. So we went from a board of 20 to a board of 40, from a budget of $3.5 million to a budget of 12, 13 million. That's very big growth for us. It was a big step. And so how are we going to raise that 12 million every year now that we're in this big building and we have much bigger expenses? We really had to think about that. And we listened to our board with business experience. We brought in some people from the venture capital world who had business experience. And we really had to think about the museum as a business from a sustainability point of view. You know, not that we were going to go off of our mission. We had to stay true to our mission. But we had to be a little bit less naive about raising funds, because we were just a different size now. And all museums have to be like that today. To the point where in the US, and I'm sure elsewhere, we're thinking, how can we increase income beyond the traditional model of soliciting donations from individuals and from corporations and foundations? What other ways? So one of the big things that we look at is earned income. And we have, I mean, just to give you an idea of where we get our different sources of funding, 10% comes from admissions. And I'm very happy to say that 50% of our visitors are from overseas. 50% of our audience is international, which is great. And we hear a lot of Portuguese being spoken in the museum. A lot of Brazilians are coming, which is lovely. And a lot of Australians too. But French, German, I mean, people, Mexican, all over. It's great. So 10% comes from the admissions that we get when people buy their tickets to come to the museum. 10% comes from special events that we do. So that would be, we have an annual gala celebration every year where we sell tickets. We rent out the top floor. This space that you see on the screen is a multi-purpose space. We have educational events there. We have performances there. We also rent it out in the evenings for dinners and for parties. So we make quite a lot on that. Our store, our bookstore, is very good. It's almost like another program. We really view it that way. It has a lot of books that you can't find in many other places of artists from all over the world, and also objects that artists make. So that has been very successful. And we're expanding that now into an online business too. We get about 10% from our board of trustees every year, and another 10% from membership. And we have now about 4,000 members, which is great, at different levels. The lowest level is like $65, and the highest level would be $15,000. We have some invitational councils, including an international council where we have top collectors from all over the world who are part of this group. And some of them have just been here in Brazil this week, actively collecting young art from Brazil. They like that. And we travel all over the world. We go to their cities and they come to us. So we're very now connected internationally through our programs and through our supporters, and they go together. They really work together. We have a trustee who is based in Sao Paulo, and I have 10 minutes. Jose Olimpio Pereira, he's joined our board, he's our most recent board member. So we're looking forward to doing many more projects here in Brazil. I'm just going to mention a few things that I'm looking forward to, that we're looking forward to, that are signature projects of the museum. One is the triennial that we do every 3 years of emerging artists from around the world. The first one was called Younger Than Jesus, and the second one, that's all artists under the age of 33. The second one, which happened last year, was called The Ungovernables, and it featured several artists from Brazil, and the curator is now the director of Inochim, and I'm sure you'll be meeting her, Anji Ju. Maybe she'll come and speak here. She's great. And then we are working on the 2015 triennial, and it will be curated by a curator named Lauren Cornell at the New Museum, whose specialty is new media art. She's working with the artist Ryan Tricarton, so an artist will be co-curating it with her. And we think it is just going to be unlike any exhibition that anyone's ever seen. I know it will be. For starters, they're consulting an astrologer about key decisions. So this is, this is really nothing I've ever heard of, but it's an intriguing idea. So the triennial is one of our most important projects. Then we have something called the Museum as Hub, where we collaborate with institutions around the world, other arts institutions in Cairo, in Seoul, in Istanbul, where else? Mexico City, Korea, yeah. And we work together to produce projects, and the idea is that we co-produce projects. It's really a curatorial experiment where we share interests and projects, and they travel around or they exist concurrently. We also learn a great deal from our partners, and we travel and do projects there as well, and they come to New York. It's a really, really effective network. that's expanding. And one of the things that we've done is to create an art space directory, which is on our website, that links into this hub. It's expanding the hub. Quite a lot. And then the last thing I'm going to just mention is our initiative, Ideas City, which, sorry, I have a little cold. I'm going to lose my voice just at the end of the talk. So Ideas City really came out of the fact that we went into this neighborhood that was down and out and started this transformation of the neighborhood around us, and thinking we have to be a platform for talking about the future of the city, because we are such a big part of change and transformation in the city. And we really believe that culture is an important part of the future city. So how can we bring the community together? How can we be a place where artists and architects and planners can meet? And Richard, maybe you better come up here now that I'm losing my voice.
I mean, basically, Lisa had, I can actually throw a compliment your way as well. Lisa had this incredible idea as to how we could also become a more integral part of our neighborhood. How, in addition to simply being a museum, which is already quite something, we could also be a civic presence in the community. And this was a thrilling idea for those of us who work there, that somehow we were going to try and find a bigger place in the world. Yes, we were, and find many new people that we could bring there. So, you're excellent. Wow. So you can join that panel if you get a passport with a visa. So at any rate, we reached out to a lot of our neighbors along the Bowery, which is a particularly rich collection of not-for-profits and also commercial interests. In the end, we created like an executive committee, basically, that were people, oh, you're so nice, thanks, with people such as Cooper Union, the incredible, for the time being, free school, and founded by Peter Cooper. Also in the neighborhood is NYU, and our partnership extended to, we became partners at the table with NYU Wagner, which is their School of Public Policy, which ended up being a very, very influential part of our thinking. We also hooked up with the Bowery Poetry Club, which is now one wonderful itinerant poet who is wandering around the city and trying to have poetry from every language that is in the city, which are, as you might imagine, an enormous number of languages. We are also working with the Storefront for Art and Architecture, an extraordinary place for those architects in the room. It should be one of the first 3 things you visit when you come to the city. And the Drawing Center, which is an amazing institution that is very parallel in a number of ways to the new museum. The Architectural League is also there at the table, and as a group, people were meeting very, very regularly, trying to figure out what kind of format we might want to put it in. And the original name was, we finally reached a point where, all right, let's just try to do this thing. And it was called Festival of Ideas for the New City, which I always thought should have been translated into French and then replayed. It's a very elaborate phrase for the United States.
I want to add something. I know I have my voice back.
I can give this. Do you want to take over again?
Don't go away, though. Okay. Here, we'll just pass it back and forth. So it very much also came out of the downturn of 2008 when we had the financial crash. And that was a huge motivating factor behind this program. It was a time when people had to get together and forget about competition. Let's all work together. This is a collaboration of 150 different organizations. Yes, we have a steering committee, but we had 150 people participating, all with the same interest, how to make the city better. It was, for us, a life-changing experience. You know, we had been so involved with art and exhibition making, and this was really taking art out into the civic realm, into, you know, beyond the walls of the museum. Yes, we believe that art is an essential part of this, and artists, too, who are working on some of these same issues, they should be at the table with policymakers, with architects and urban planners. And so we see our mission now as bringing these groups together. This is a very radical thing for a museum to do. I mean, I don't think any other museum that I'm aware of is doing quite this thing. I mean, there are some other laboratories for urban futures, but we're doing it in a big way. And we had 70,000 people come to this first festival, as Richard said, Festival of Ideas for the New City, which is now Ideas City. And we had people coming to us from all over the world saying, would you help to do a program like this in our city? So last year we were in Istanbul, and next year we will be in Sao Paulo doing something like this. So we wanted to mention to you that we will be here in October, and we will be working with a lot of local architects and planners and thinkers, and bringing some artists, yes, and bringing some people from New York and from our past festivals. But we're extremely excited about this, and I don't know, it's given Richard and I a whole new lease on life, and a new mission, a new direction, and an expanded mission for the museum and what a museum can be. So, anything to add to that?
Well, I think what I can add to it is when we did the first project in Istanbul, again, nobody knew what it was going to turn out to be. Nobody knew how solid the partnerships that we had scrambled together were going to be. And it turned out to be, we streamlined it down. It was a keynote one evening, a day of 2 panels, and a day of workshops. And we were nervous. We were really quite nervous. It turned out to be amazing. By the 3rd day, we were really talking to our Turkish colleagues in the workshops, amazing ideas which we had been told not even to think about touching when we were trying to plan for Istanbul. People all of a sudden were talking about the forbidden topics. It was really thrilling, very helpful. And I think now we've learned a lot from that. I think we've also, I think coming to Sao Paulo, where the tradition of architecture, the tradition of symposia, urbanism is huge. I mean, I did some initial research, and it's hundreds and hundreds of initiatives are taking place here all the time. So it's also, how can we not repeat it? How can we not come here and be insulting in terms of what we think are the right things to look at? So, I mean, I've been here a week already, just wandering around talking to some of the most amazing minds I can think of. It's thrilling to contemplate being here. We'll be doing the project at Cesc Pompeia, which we think is a wonderful place. The collaboration thus far has been extraordinary, and it's a wonderful urban place to be working.
Thank you.
I'm your power pack. If you don't need my hotel card.
So yeah, one of the things that this reinforced for us is that you always have to go to the taboo subject. What's the unmentionable thing? What's making people uncomfortable? Just to go back to the very beginning, that we need to push ourselves out of our comfort zone constantly. And with Ideas City, it's the same. In Istanbul, it was the things they said don't talk about, which were exactly the things everyone wanted to talk about. So anyway, that's where I'll end, and I'm happy to take questions, and I'm sure Richard would too. Thank you very much. You have a question? Or an answer? I mean, I mentioned that the city did give us 10% for the new building, and they were a partner in the end, though they hadn't planned on it initially. And we get about 4% of our annual funding from the government. But in a way, it's very liberating too, because you know, there's no censorship. They can't try to control what we're doing. So it's a benefit as well. However, it's very challenging to raise that much money every year. And in other countries, I think like Brazil or in Europe, where governments are giving 70, 80% of the annual costs, it sounds pretty attractive at times to me. Yeah, it's debatable. It's debatable. But I think the kind of incentives that you have here through like the Rione is very good, very positive.
But then how do you convince the private sector?
Not being known, like you say, you know, which new museum, not being known. So it's a chicken or egg, because you're not going to get known until you raise the money, and you're not going to raise the money until you get known. So, yeah. Seduction, I don't know. Relentlessness. You just keep hammering away. Really, no, really what it is building a community of people that care about the same things that you care about. And that we were able to do. You have to find like-minded people. And don't waste your time. And then the other advice we had was, don't waste your time on people that don't care about your mission. It's really about your mission, your passion, and your mission. And the other advice that I got was, you know, concentrate on billionaires. Go find some billionaires. And because 90% of what you're raising comes from 1% of the people, which is true. So it's, you know, it's that 1%. It's that 1%. It's not the 99%. Although now there's other models, crowdsourced, you know, Kickstarter funding and other kinds of things where you can use the internet to put together massive campaigns with smaller amounts. You probably have to do both and see where you come out. Yeah. Yes, there are professionals. I would say in every case, though, my interest was in putting together people, the right people, whether it's the right trustees, staff, or consultants. It really was about the person, not, you know, not the firm or anything else. It was the individual. And that's part of forming this community that's very dynamic. And yeah, there are people. We went to someone who runs the Philanthropy Institute at NYU. She's 90 years old, Naomi Levine. And she's amazing. She worked with Larry Tisch to build NYU into this big powerhouse. And she just came and spoke to our board and said things that I could never say. She said, you either give or you get out of here. You get off the board. Give or get off. I could not say that, but she said it. And they were really shocked. And she also said, you know, women have a lot of wealth, and no one's paying attention to them. You know, go and research. There's so many women that have vast resources, and they really are overlooked. They're not paid attention to, and sometimes they don't have the direction. That was her advice as a 90-year-old woman. I guess she'd had success. So, yes, we worked with her. She didn't do that, work with others for a living, but she decided to help us. And we worked with some very good public relations consultants who helped build, and that's important too, to build the visibility and the profile of the museum, and it wouldn't have been possible without their help, for sure. The lobbyist was also critical, as was the person that we brought in from the venture capital world who helped us structure the campaign and learn the language of business. That was important too, and really professionalize a lot of the museum operations. So, yes, to all of those things. And then we also had many roundtables with artists and people in the field to talk about what could a future you know, a museum of the 21st century be? Well, it was a different culture then. It was a different culture. It was, they were supportive, but the museum maybe had a $400,000 annual cost. You know, it was just a different scale completely. So to get people to understand when they were used to giving $5,000 a year, they used to give something, but not all. I mean, not all were giving. But they had to leave if they didn't want to, you know. Actually, before I came, they got rid of all those people that were not giving. And I think it's very important if you're on a board. Sometimes you have people on a board that are there for other reasons, for special expertise, but that's an exception. So, great. Thank you very much for coming. See you in October. Glad I have my voice back.